heard the conventional view. Now prepare yourself to hear the other side. High school teachers Mike Margison and Justin Spears bring you the alternative view you didn't get in the classroom. Now here they are, Margison, and Spears.
Well, good evening out there. It's good Thursday evening to everybody. Hope you're all doing well. You are now listening to the Other Side podcast with Margison and Spears. I am Justin Spears. Joined with me this evening is the other side of the other side, Mr. Mike Margison. We'll bring him in here in just a moment. Before we do that, just want to go through our contact information for those of you that just stumbled upon the podcast and wondering what you're hearing and how can you hear more of this. You can catch us in several different venues. We're on Facebook. You can contact us through there at TOS_podcast. You can get us on Twitter. I'm at Justin Spears 4. He's at Mr. Margison. You can hear the show in a number of different formats. If you are the podcast type that you like to download shows and take them with you, listen in your car, listen as you go about your day, we are on iTunes. We are on Google Play Podcasts. We are on the Spreaker radio app. And all three of those, if you search The Other Side with Margison and Spears, you will find our show available for download. If you're in the Indiana, more particular West Central Crawfordsville area, you can catch us Saturday mornings on WCVL 92.1 1550 AM. Thank you to the fine folks over there for supporting our show. You can catch us on the Cerberus Radio Network. We are a part of the Cerberus Radio Network group. Great programming over there. Suzanne Sherman, Dan Bailey, Jeff Johnson. Highly encourage you to check out the Cerberus Radio Network. We are on 9 o'clock weeknights. I believe Monday through Saturday, you can catch replays of our shows through the Cerberus Radio Network. So lots of different platforms to be able to catch the show. But without further ado, let's bring in the other side of the other side, Mr. Mike Margison. Mike, what in fact is going on this evening?
Just enjoying summer.
Oh, that's an awesome feeling. Yeah, that's an awesome feeling. Again, for those of you that are fairly new to the program, Mike and I are both public education teachers here in the state of Indiana, and we just wrapped up our school year here, so we're feeling pretty good about that. Got a lot on the plate for this summer, but we'll definitely take the break and rejuvenate and recharge the batteries and all that jazz. So it's kind of be one of our topics for this evening. We're going to focus in here a little bit on some education matters before concluding with some talk about some current events pertaining to one Roseanne Barr this past week, getting herself in a little bit of trouble on Twitter. So before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit about what went down in education here as we got toward the end of the school year. We had several states, I believe Arizona, Kentucky, earlier in the year, West Virginia, where we saw a threat. I think Oklahoma was in there as well, of teacher walkouts, right? And I know for a fact in West Virginia, shut down the entire state education system for the main reason being dispute over pay. And this is one of the things that we always hear ad nauseum, educators talking about pay and disparity and lack of pay and all that jazz. So I'm going to let Mike kind of run with this one here, and I'll jump in when needed and everything. So, Mike, talk to us a little bit, chat us up about what was going on here in these states, and in particular as it relates to these threats or these actual teacher walkouts and pay disputes. Tell us a little bit about what was going on with all that.
Okay. Well, I think it started in West Virginia was the first state to do it, and then it spread to Arizona. No, it actually might have been Kentucky next. And then to Arizona, and then after Arizona, Oklahoma, and I think recently North Carolina. They were either threatening to walk out or they did walk out. I can't remember. But what the point is, what all of these states have in common is they are red states, which means the mainstream media is absolutely loving this. The fact that you have a whole bunch of unionized teachers in these states that either have Republican governors or went for Trump in the 2016 election, where the public teachers unions are saying we're fed up and we're walking out. And so it's just been article after article after article on very sympathetic to these teachers on how these nasty Republican governors and these Republican red states, all they want to do is cut budgets. They don't care about kids, and they're highlighting these teachers. And talking about how little they make and how difficult their lives are. And it's just, I mean, it's just, they're just gushing over it. And so nationwide, there is this perception that teachers are basically just treated like dirt, you know, and mainly treated like dirt in red states, right? States that have Republican governors, or at least Republican legislatures. And so what I want to talk about is just how misleading this narrative is, right? And the mainstream media is totally misleading. They are completely biased. I mean, I wouldn't even call it journalism at this point, and they barely even try to hide it. But this one's been particularly touchy for me because we're both teachers. So anyway, I'm going to reference a FEE article here. FEE is the Foundation for Economics Education, fee.org, FEE.org, and it's a great outlet. And last week, they had an article about how the media is kind of misinforming about teacher pay. And so I want to reference that, but I also want to talk about how I think this article misses the mark. It missed something larger here. But in this article, it was by James Agresti. He goes on to reference a CNN article by Bill Ware. And he highlights this one claim in the CNN article where Bill Ware says that, quote, in most districts of Oklahoma, a teacher with a doctorate degree and 30 years experience will never make more than $50,000 a year. Now, that's an important line to highlight because that kind of sums up the media narrative behind the way teachers are getting treated here, right? So I'm going to read that again. A teacher, this is in the CNN article, referenced here in this FEE article that I'm reading from. But in this CNN article, Bill Ware says that in most districts of Oklahoma, a teacher with a doctorate degree and 30 years experience will never make more than $50,000 a year. Well, the intention there is for the average American to look at that and say, well, that's absolutely outrageous. We're talking about a teacher working for these kids, obviously with a doctorate degree, they know what they're doing. So, and the fact that they'll never make more than $50,000 a year, that's just outrageous. And they just kind of feed you these misleading stats like here and there. And in this FEE article, the author does go on to explain how misleading these figures are. Well, first of all, of course, in the CNN article, they don't document it. They neglect to document where they actually got that figure. But what we see here is we see salary numbers, and that's it, right? So these are just salary numbers that are coming out, and that is only one part of a larger compensation package that most public educators are benefit from. So on average, salary makes up only about 2/3 of what public educators actually get, right? The rest of it is in benefits such as like health insurance, paid leave, pensions. All of that stuff makes up about 1/3 of their total compensation package. So just to give you the numbers, the average salary for a teacher in the United States for the 2016-17 school year is about $58,000 a year, which is right on par with the overall median salary in the United States. But that's just salary, Justin. That doesn't take into account $28,900 in benefits that the average school teacher gets to take home. And these are taxpayer subsidized benefits. Like I said, like healthcare and paid leave and pension. So what that means is that the taxpayer cost to actually employ a teacher is about $87,854 on average total. Now you can see how much different, like that puts it in an entirely different light, right? If we were to say that, on average, teachers are only bringing in, or they're only compensated $87,800 a year, most people would say, well, what do you mean only? Like that's absolutely fair, if not too much. But they'll never say that. They're only going to report like what the actual salary is, and so that leaves out a major chunk of that. So that is a big problem. But this wasn't mentioned in the FEE article. But the other problem that I had with this is if you're talking about the fact that somebody who has 30 years experience and a doctoral degree, and they're in some rural district in Oklahoma, and they're not going to make $50,000. That's it by itself is a completely meaningless statement anyway. That would be like me saying to you, Justin, hey, what if I told you that, a McDonald's employee with a doctorate in philosophy and 30 years experience working at McDonald's as a fry cook is never going to make more than $10 an hour? Well, you would say, well, okay, you're not doing doctoral level work, so what do you expect? I mean, if all you're doing is, cooking hamburgers and French fries, then you can't expect more than $11 an hour. And so the stupidity behind this line that a teacher with a doctorate degree in rural Oklahoma will never make more than $50,000 a year, well, that's because they're not doing doctoral level work. What do superintendents make in Oklahoma? They make six figures, and nobody's going to cry about that because superintendents are doing doctoral level work. But to say that somebody who is teaching, might not make X amount, but then just throw in these confusing and misleading facts. I mean, by saying that they have a doctorate degree, it doesn't mean anything, because if you're not doing doctoral level work, then that's a totally meaningless and misleading statement. It's meant to do nothing more than confuse the average American and make things look much worse than they actually are. The last thing I want to point out about what's misleading here, and again, this is kind of mentioned in the fee article, but I don't think they did a good enough job with it. And that is what a salary is in relationship to the actual cost of living in an area. So I had to go and I had to look this up. And this is very easy to find. You just Google, what is the average home price in Oklahoma? And then you also Google, what is the average teacher salary in Oklahoma? So in Oklahoma, the average home price is $120,000 a year. The average teacher salary for the state is $45,000 a year. So you have about a 2.5 to 1 ratio, right? In other words, it's the home price to salary is about 2.5 to 1. And that's important because that means that's going to dictate what kind of standard of living you're able to have. Housing is the number one expense for any individual in the United States. And that's also going to dictate how much disposable income that you have after that in order to be able to spend on, cars or vacation or healthcare or whatever else you have to spend money on. So yeah, the ratio is about 2.5 to 1 in Oklahoma. Well, let's look up at the top of the list for teacher salaries, right? If that's the metric that the left wants to use. And you go up there towards the top and you can find Massachusetts, where they, on average, the teachers will make about $80,000 a year. Now, Massachusetts is a deep blue state. I mean, very, very liberal. And you have teachers making, I guess, what is fair in salary, according to whoever, makes these decisions, but the teachers are up there well compensating at $80,000 a year. But what is the average home price in in Massachusetts? It's over $400,000 a year. So the teacher's salary is about 1/5 what it costs to actually live in the state, which means their standard of living is going to be lower. On average, a teacher in deep blue Oklahoma, okay, great, they make $80,000 a year, but what does that mean? With the salary, a salary only makes sense in terms of what it can get you in terms of goods and services. So if the home value to salary ratio is 5 to 1 in Massachusetts, well, heck, I'd much rather be in Oklahoma where it's only 2.5 to 1, because that means more disposable income and a higher standard of living for myself. So, but again, none of that is going to be mentioned because that simply doesn't fit the narrative. The narrative here is to show that Republicans, red states are evil. All they do is cut budgets, and they don't care about kids, and they don't care about teachers, and all they're doing is trying to line their own pockets. And it's a false and bogus, misleading narrative. And I'll tell you what, as a teacher, this bugs me because I mean, I don't want to speak for you, Justin, but I do not feel undercompensated at all. Especially, look, what did I do today? I woke up, I went for a run. I took a nap today, right? And I'm still getting paid. The paycheck is going to come. This pay. So we get paid what, next Friday? So this falls into this pay period. I got paid for taking a nap today. People are supposed to feel sorry for me for this. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. we do have the summers off. We do have a very fair compensation plan. If you look strictly at the salary, yeah, you might say that's not the highest salary, but teachers know what they're doing when they get into this.
No, yeah, and I'll just jump in here real quick too, because I guess I do have a little bit of a unique perspective in that I'm not a traditional teacher. My background is in the business world, and I've worked sales jobs, I've worked corporate jobs, and I can tell you the trade-off for the schedule, the trade-off for the holiday off. I mean, my wife has to go through this huge ordeal, and she's in healthcare industry, a huge ordeal because of Medicaid, Medicare, and having to have therapy delivered on so many days of the year just to get a holiday off. I don't even have to worry about that. In fact, I get time wrapped around Christmas and New Year's. Like you mentioned, the month and a half, 2 months off for the summer. I never have to worry about working weekends, working evenings. Now, I know teachers will throw up, well, the number of hours that we put in outside of, that. I'm sorry, that does not hold water with me. If you've ever had to work a corporate job, you're always on the clock. I don't care what anybody tells you. And it's even worse when you're salaried. And I've worked those salary jobs before where they will work you like a broke mule to get everything they can out of you. Phone calls 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, sales calls, you name it. And the trade-off of maybe not having as high of a base of salary is by and large, and this doesn't even begin to touch on what I get to do for a living, which is hopefully to help shape the youth in my community. To me, it's a no-brainer.
Justin, what was the compensation package like at where you were when you were working in the corporate world? Because the statistics that I have are that the compensation packages and fringe benefits for public school educators are about 20% larger than they are for private sector workers. Did you see the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you, at least from a retirement perspective, being in the Indiana Teachers Retirement Fund, that is a huge weight off of my shoulders, and being able to contribute into that and know what that's going to mean for me as I, approach retirement age and the formula for being able to retire. I mean, the 401ks and things of that nature, most places will contribute up to 3% match on 401k. But, beyond that, the healthcare benefits, I never worked for a publicly traded company that had any kind of stock options. I guess I did at one point. I was with a grocery chain that was traded on NASDAQ, and I had a couple of shares that I was given through some bonus things and stuff like that. But, there's so much risk in all of that. And I feel like the compensation package that I have right now is much more secure and safe than it was with anything that I had in the corporate world.
Yeah, and like you said, being on the clock. I mean, yeah, when teachers say, it really bugs me too, and I'm glad you brought that up. Where teachers say, "Well, I work at home." Well, tell me somebody who doesn't, right? I mean, like honestly, and I'm looking at the website where I'm getting these statistics. It's called Just Facts, and so anybody can go to it. It's actually it's a very good website, but it's justfacts.com, and it's showing here that on average, full-time private industry employees work 37% more hours than full-time public school teachers. And that, so to say that they have higher salaries, well, what do you expect? They work more. So of course they have higher salaries. But then when you actually add in the compensation package, the total compensation is not different. It's the same. A teacher is basically what this is saying is a public school teacher is working less and getting paid the same as their private sector counterpart. And so when these teachers walk out and hold up these signs saying "Red for Ed" and they pretend like they care about the kids, it just makes me want to puke. I can't stand it.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to throw in here, Mike, and I don't know if you had this in your prep at all, so I don't mean to throw you a curveball. If you don't worry about it. If you come across anything that's talked about restructuring the pay formula for teachers, I've had some side conversations with a friend of mine who's in education as well. And we were talking a little bit about the general fund and taxpayer dollars. Should it be more of a statewide system versus local? tax base, follow the dollars. Where does all that go? Have you come across anything that's proposed any major changes in the way that teachers are compensated from a pay structure standpoint?
Not here in Indiana that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, that's always, I think, in a state like Indiana, again, categorized as a typical red state, but also, I think, fairly, comparable to most Midwestern states in that, we have a couple of big metropolitan areas and then a lot of rural area. And you'll see, as much as you hear about the disadvantaged inner city schools, there's a lot of schools that are struggling in these rural areas as well because the tax bases are so awful. There's just not the funds to be able to pool to pay the teachers, what you can get. The kind of sweet spot is your suburban schools, your donut counties around Indianapolis, your metropolitan, township schools and things of that nature, where you're flush with, some fairly well to value, like you were talking about, home property taxes and things of that nature. But then there's also more corporations that are spreading out there as well. Just curious to know if you'd come across anything that had, brought up.
I have not. I have not heard anything about restructuring pay. So, I mean, it may be out there. I'm not aware of it.
Yeah. Well, as we start to wrap this up here, tell us a little bit about, what is the, I guess, I don't want to say the future of this, but, as obviously we're going to be hitting a period of time here in the summer where, this may calm down, but it was hit pretty hot and heavy. I mean, what do you see in the future for this, going into next school year? I mean, I still am awestruck by the fact that an entire state school system was shut down by teacher walkouts. I mean, we're talking, this is a big deal here. What do you foresee in the immediate future with these?
You know what? Honestly, I see more teachers getting emboldened and just demanding more money without any real rhyme or reason to the demands. So this is something I tweeted out probably about a month ago, but I'm going to repeat it here. In Arizona, they were demanding a 20% pay increase. And I was just wondering, okay, what is that based on? Is your output 20% better? Are your test scores 20% higher? Are the kids 20% more successful than they were before? Where do you get off asking taxpayers to kick in 20% more money to you when all of the indicators suggest that you're doing at best the same as you were before? In many cases, the metrics are showing us that things are getting worse across the nation in education. I saw this, I'm getting a little off topic here. I saw this statistic, and this was just unbelievable. There were 13 schools in Baltimore, in the Baltimore school system, where not a single graduate could, I think it was either math or English, was able to perform it at a 12th grade level. Not a single graduate was proficient. And this is, of course, deep blue Maryland. And if you look at the average compensation package in Maryland, it's extremely high. It's right below New Jersey, but they're up total compensation up over $100,000 a year. But not a single kid is proficient. We want more money? You're underpaid? I don't understand where you get off asking taxpayers to kick this in. So in Arizona, when you demand, you go through, you make these demands, you cry, you say it's about the kids and all of this. I got friends who live in Arizona, and he was telling me, he was out to lunch one time. He saw a bunch of these guys. They had their Red for Ed shirts on, because that's the thing. This is the thing. It's all about, this is all political, by the way. It's all about Republican. That's why they're wearing red. So he goes to lunch on his lunch break. He says there's a whole bunch of these Arizona teachers who are supposed to be in class teaching the kids. They're on a walkout and they're getting hammered outside. It's a nice spring day, of course, and they're just out there drinking beer. I mean, I would be absolutely mortified, embarrassed. But instead, they're demanding a 20% pay increase based upon nothing. Nothing is 20% better than it was before, and they're getting it. And what happened in state after state, if you go and you look at what happened in Kentucky, and you look at what happened in West Virginia, you look at what happened in Oklahoma, $6,000 a year pay increase that was provided, 5.1% pay increase that was provided. This is going to embolden teachers in other areas to just walk out and demand more money. And I'll tell you what, if this ever happened in Indiana or in our school, or I don't care if I was the only one in the school, I at least have pride. I'm showing up for work every day. And if the kids don't come, I don't care. I'm going to be in there, and I'm going to be ready to go. Whether the students show up or not, but I am not doing this.
Yeah, that's right. And Mike, too, I'm glad you brought that up about the Baltimore issue as well. I'll tell you, the one thing that really gets at me, and it probably eats at me the most around this time of year, is full and well that there were parents who were overwhelmed with joy that their son or daughter had made it, right? That there were graduation open houses and pictures, and they were celebrating making it through. And you look at that and go, but what did you make? What did you get through? Like, what can you show me that you can do as a result of being a product of the public school system? What are we celebrating here? And, when you see that kind of stuff happening, I got to be candid. I got to be honest. I mean, it hurts. It hurts to see that and know that, that there are parents who are, again, overwhelmed with joy, very proud of this, so-called accomplishment. And gosh, you just have to say, what? Accomplished what? Show me what you've done. Go out now and prove to me that this has been a good investment. And, as you said, if they're not proficient and they can't do these things, then something's got to change. I'm not placing the blame on the teachers. I'm not placing the blame on the kids. It's more a product of the system. Unfortunately, as we've talked about several times before in past episodes. But gosh, that sometimes, man, that here recently, I was seeing some stuff and I was just like, I have a hard time with that one.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is that the parents they do tend to implicitly just kind of trust the system and trust the teachers. And I think that they believe that when their kid gets through 12th grade, that there is a certain level of proficiency comes with that. And I don't think, unless they're teachers themselves, they really understand that, yeah, it's possible to graduate the 12th grade and not be proficient in math or English. I mean, it's completely possible, which, it's fine. Again, that is a systemic problem. You and I have talked about this. We are not blaming the teachers. We're not blaming the families. Our education system as it is, that is what you're going to get. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But when I see teachers put on a mask and pretend to care about kids and then demand more money, it eats me up. I can't take it. It's just pathetic. It's embarrassing, to me as a teacher, that I got to get lumped in with these clowns.
Yep. 100% agree. Well, as we wrap this up, is there anything else that we've left out that you wanted to touch upon as we wrap up
here? Yeah, I got a couple of things on my notes here. I don't know if anybody would find this useful. Quit rates. This is an economic measure that you will see in the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And if you look at the quit rates for teachers are very low. Now, if you see low quit rates across an economy, a QR, a quit rate, if you see a low quit rate across an economy, that can actually indicate an unhealthy economy. People are afraid to leave their jobs because they don't see anything better out there for them. If you see high quit rates, and the quit rate is completely voluntary, by the way. If you see a high quit rate across an economy, that might indicate a strengthening economy because people feel comfortable leaving their position because they believe there's going to be something real quick turnaround that they can grab that's going to be better. But in an individual industry, you can look at quit rates compared to other industries and see whether people are really just fed up with the pay. And believe it or not, Justin, quit rates in state and local education are extremely low. In fact, the only rate that is lower, and this is not going to be surprising, are federal employees. They're federal, I'm serious. It is the only industry where they quit at a lower rate than in education. So if this was as miserable, absolutely miserable as they make it out to be, you would tend to see the quit rates higher, but that's just not the case. They'll bitch, complain, moan, pardon the language there, but it's really just posturing in my opinion. I think that was I think other than that, I've hit everything on my notes.
I feel like we needed to cue up the old Dire Straits "Money for Nothing" song for this episode for sure. So, all right. Well, for those of you listening on 92.1 1550 WCVL, we're going to leave it there for this week. We'll be back again next week with a fresh episode of The Other Side. For those of you that are listening online, we will continue the conversation after this break.
All right, Justin, Roseanne Barr.
Yeah.
You brought her up in the beginning. And this, I mean, did you see this Samantha Bee thing today also?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to.
Okay, you go ahead, run with it.
I'm glad you brought that up there. So, yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with this, like I said, we try to bring up some current event stuff, and going through the education thing certainly was topical. And, in our true spirit of The Other Side, I thought, man, when I heard about this was a great example here of understanding, where we are as a society today. So for those of you that have been living under a rock for the last 72 hours or so, Roseanne Barr, who had experienced a rejuvenation in her reboot of the show, the Roseanne Barr Show, had kind of taken a turn of taken on political topics and things of that nature. I have, on full honesty, not watched an episode of it. I was a huge watcher of it back in the day, but I have not watched a single episode of the reboot here. But Roseanne got herself into trouble with a tweet that she sent out, and I want to just be very, very clear in saying up front that I do not support or agree with what she said. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, again, her tweet was something along the lines, it was taking a shot at Valerie Jarrett, who worked with President Obama. It's something like, if the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby, it would be Valerie Jarrett, or something along those lines. Clearly, tasteless, across the line, all the adjectives you want to use to describe it. Now, when we get to the reaction, right, this is where it gets interesting. So ABC, which was the broadcasting company that would run her show, comes out, immediately disavows the tweet. We're hiring up executives. We do not condone this type of behavior, yada yada yada, standard corporate stuff. And then it pretty quickly led to the cancellation of the show, along with removing all episodes off of streaming platforms like Hulu, which is partly owned by ABC Disney. So again, whether you agree or disagree with that really isn't that big of a deal. Where again, it really starts to get interesting here is, and this is what I did, was I Googled double standard of the Roseanne controversy, and I was able to find a article from The Hill related to what you just mentioned, Mike, which was Samantha Bee. For those of you that aren't familiar with Miss B's work, she is a quote unquote comedian that has a show on, I believe, TBS, Turner Broadcasting, called Full Frontal. Again, full disclosure, have not ever watched an episode of Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, although I have heard some of Miss B's work before. Very offensive, kind of that cutting edge, kind of what gets, I think, cloaked as humor, but isn't.
Yeah,
humor.
What is like? I mean, you said quote unquote comedian, but I don't even know what that means anymore.
Yeah, really, I think it's just who can go up and say the most offensive thing and get away with it. The art of joke telling and creating a story and a narrative is just gone. I mean, the comedians, listen, I'm not saying that comedians weren't vile, but when you listen to guys like Carlin and Pryor and even Andrew Dice Clay, who could be, obviously overly edgy, but they had that kind of shtick. They had that kind of like, yeah, it was edgy. When you listen to Carlin, yeah, it's vile and everything, but I think at least people could say like, yeah, but he's got a point, or he's telling a story, or he's got a narrative here. It wasn't just, there
was an art to it.
Yeah, I guess that's a way of saying it, is, as whether you agree or disagree with it or not, I don't think it was just like, hey, I just want to say this to see, how far I can push it or who I can get a rise out of. So at any rate, what she says on her show the other night is, she was trying to tackle something related to the U.S.-Mexico border issue with policies separating children from their parents. And they put a picture up of Ivanka Trump embracing her son. And B's response was, Ivanka, that's a beautiful photo of you and your child, but let me just say, one mother to another, do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless C word. I'll blur it out and you can use your imagination. Calling the first lady that, oh my goodness,
First
right?
daughter.
I mean, yeah. Oh, the daughter. Yeah. Excuse me. You would have thought that there would be a backlash on that, right? There's been absolutely nothing at all. TBS, which is owned by CNN to Turner Broadcasting, there's been nothing. There's been no call for, hey, we disagree with what was said. We don't condone these actions. Obviously, no talk about canceling the show, just absolutely nothing, complete crickets. And again, I do think it highlights that double standard in the media, along with guys like Keith Olbermann. If you want to hit a little bit closer to home, Disney, ESPN, Olbermann, which I know he's no longer affiliated with ESPN to my knowledge, but it has a show on MSNBC, has said just some awful stuff about the president, commonly referring to him as a Nazi, over the top characterizations of Trump and his policies, along with other conservatives as well. So, I don't think anybody should be overly surprised by this. But again, in the true spirit of this being the other side, I thought it was interesting to point out. And I know others have been saying, for example, the Cosby Show, still reruns available of that. One thing that was really interesting too, related to directly to the Roseanne issue, was comedian Wanda Sykes, African-American woman who was, I guess, a writer on the show, immediately quit the show, although she has some just awful stuff, again, related to Trump and conservatives and things of that nature in her background as well. Yet again, we hear absolutely nothing. And so again, I guess the larger point that I have to this is, if we're really going to look at pushing a narrative of, creating entertainment, I guess, for people that is void of this, we've got to call a strike and a ball. We can't gloss over just because it doesn't fit the political narrative, or it doesn't fit being able to call somebody a racist or a homophobe or a bigot or anything like that. I don't understand where this comes from and why people just kind of shrug their shoulders at it and think, well, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer is that there's no real substance behind this anger. Like, people who are angry about what Roseanne said, I don't think we're really angry about what Roseanne said. I mean, I just don't. I think that's all fake outrage, and any chance that they could get to take her down, they were going to take. Now, that having been said, how stupid can you possibly be knowing that? Well, first of all, her tweet, it wasn't even funny. I mean, it's just mean. It's mean-spirited. It's vicious. And why attack somebody's looks? What are you going to get out of that? Not to mention the fact that you've just screwed yourself. And I don't think canceling the show is a solution. I mean, I don't know what that solves. For the record, I don't think that Samantha Bee should have her full frontal canceled. If there is a demand for it, people should be able to tune in and watch it. So I mean, I'm very clear there.
Sorry to interrupt, but the unforgotten thing about all this as well is there's a lot of people who are now, I don't want to say like, oh, we should throw a pity party for them, but this affects a lot of people. It's not like, okay, we're just hitting Roseanne here. I mean, there are other people associated with the show, not just the other actors like Goodman and Gilbert and all those guys. They're going to be fine. But, there are other people that were working on the show that I'm sure, probably needed this show.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you just like think about the typical sound guy that's apolitical, who doesn't care, that's just trying to collect a paycheck, and it's not great pay, but to make enough. So I think that's a great point there. But I mean, when the faux outrage, you have to make it as real as possible, and so, but it's so classic that Samantha Bee did her thing the day after Roseanne did her thing, and just the complete. Now, what they're saying is it's not the same. Like, so if you go and you read the commentary from the left who's defending B, she's saying, well, what Roseanne said was racist, and that's a lot different than calling, Ivanka a C word. I don't understand that argument. I don't get why one is better than the other. I think they're both pretty awful, but whatever.
But you know what, too, the other thing about that's funny. I was reading a New York Times article about all this, and the guy that wrote the article was basically kind of saying that Roseanne had said something else at a corporate meeting. She was, I guess, like maybe the keynote or one of the first people to speak, and she made a joke about Chelsea, calling her Chelsea Soros Clinton. And the guy's like, well, she erroneously called Chelsea Soros Clinton. I'm like, it was a joke, dude. It was meant to be a tie to George Soros and the Clintons. I don't think she literally thought her middle name was Soros. It was like, these people are tone deaf and clueless.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to disagree with that.
So, yeah, I thought that was an interesting development this week. And again, I know, as we've talked about, several times in many other different variants, the double standard that exists today with, whether it be racism or sexism or, homophobia, whatever it is, and the way that in which these terms get applied and thrown at people and, whatever it might be, there isn't a doubt in my mind that if you're a conservative and you make one of these faux pas, that you're going to pay to the max for it. Again, not defending it, not saying that she shouldn't have had some consequence. I'm not going to sit here and, try to say that I know what the right punishment should have been or ought to have been.
It should be tuners or viewers tuning out if you don't like it. Now, this would not affect me watching the show. You said you didn't watch it. I actually did watch it, and it was pretty. I liked the early Roseanne. It was on when I was a teenager, and so I enjoyed watching it. And I kind of got into this. Some of the episodes were good. Some of them, weren't that good. I would not watch the show because she sent a tweet like this. I mean, it doesn't affect me enough to not watch the show. I can look at it and say, A, the tweet was mean. B, the tweet was stupid. But I'm still going to watch the show. But if people are really, really, really outraged, well, then you just drop the ratings far enough to where ABC says, hey, we got to pull the plug on this because we're getting killed. We're losing money. That's a simple, there's a market mechanism for everything. That's
right. Absolutely. That's a great call. Hey, as we wrap this up, I want to circle back to something that we talked about here a little bit ago in relation to kind of what is comedy and what is, crossing the line and everything. I know you and I have had conversations before about this. What is it that keeps a show like, for example, South Park, where people will look at that and just say, oh, that's hilarious, that's funny, or, whatever it might be, versus, something that you just look at and you go, oh, no, I can't. That clearly crossed the line. I mean, we always talk about, like, when you were mentioning the Arizona teachers wanting 20% pay increase. Well, why not 22%? Why not 21.5%? Where's this magic number that you get? Where is this magic line of comedy genius, creativity versus that's just over the line? I mean, there is some really vulgar stuff, and obviously that show, South Park in particular, is a casebook example of that. And just out of curiosity, what are your feelings about that?
Well, you were mentioning earlier, like George Carlin and Richard Pryor, and I would really put Trey Parker and Matt Stone into that category of extremely creative. And they, two of my favorite comedians of the 90s, I'm going to have a point to this, I'm going to get back to it in a second, were Chris Rock and Jerry Seinfeld. All right, you're a 90s guy, so you probably heard the Chris Rock routine, and I'm sure you probably saw Seinfeld. And totally different in their approaches, right? But there was a kind of a genius and a creativity behind it. There was a method to what they were saying. It wasn't just indiscriminate, curse words. It's not creative just to call the first daughter a feckless C word because you don't like her dad's immigration policies. That's not a thing. That's anybody off of the streets could do that. That's not impressive. So if you're my point is, if you are more offended by foul language, you might, really enjoy Jerry Seinfeld. If that thing doesn't offend you, you might have really enjoyed Chris Rock. But it can be done. I mean, it doesn't have to be either vulgar or non-vulgar in order for it to be comedy. There's something more that surrounds it that actually makes it witty and creative and kind of eye-opening, and it almost makes you think, but at the same time it makes you laugh. And so you can have what are they going in their 20th season? I think South Park, they're just hitting their 20th season, and oh my goodness, some of the stuff that they do, it just makes you like, you know what I mean? You're just going, I literally can't believe I just saw that on television. But at the same time, it makes you laugh, and you never go, God, we gotta get these guys off the air. And I tell you what, they have a ever so slight I don't think I wouldn't say it's conservative. They're very logical in the way that they think. But they have this slight, kind of tint to them. And if it was just indiscriminate vulgarity, like what I think I think that's what I would say Roseanne's tweet was. It was a not funny, like stupid tweet. But if that was what South Park was doing, I think that my point is, I think that they would be off the air. But they're doing something more. There's something more. There's something actually behind it that's comedic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think you also kind of help yourself too when you're not targeting. I think that's one of the things that I think they're kind of, known for is they'll go after everybody. Nobody's off limits with those guys.
Oh no. Did you ever see the one with like the controversy with Muhammad?
Yes. Oh yeah.
That was just, I mean, they are going to find wherever, as far as the envelope goes, and they're going to push it a step further. I mean, that's how they operate, but it's worked for them.
Yeah, no, it is. It is such an interesting concept to think about. At what point does creative genius, entertainment kind of run, the idea of being able to tell what would normally be, a racist joke if you were telling it around the dinner table with your family or what have you. And there was another like minor thing. I can't even remember who it was. It might have been Kendrick Lamar or somebody, one of the modern day rap artists, who invited a fan up on stage to sing with him. And this white girl gets up on stage. He's an African American, and she's singing his song, and she drops the N-word while she's singing the song, which is his lyrics. And he stops the song and chastises her in front of all the fans and says, "You cannot say that word. When it comes to that word, you've got to bleep it out." And I mean, he's being dead serious about this. He's not just like ribbing her. I mean, he's being really, really serious about this. So it's so fascinating to think about, what's allowable, what's not, where's the line, when do you cross it? I mean, obviously, like you said, the Roseanne thing, clearly crossing the line, no comedic humor to it at all. It doesn't matter if you're 2 a.m. ambient tweeting or not, no humor in that. But it does give you pause to say, but gosh, like, why is that allowed? Or why is that okay? Or what is it, some magic formula that when this guy says this or that girl says that it's like, that's comedy. Okay. I can laugh at that and move on. It's just fascinating to me. So
yeah, that's a good point. And I have no good answer for it. But you're right. It's just, it seems like the lines are crossed by different people, and they get totally different reactions for effectively doing the same thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it, I think, for this episode of The Other Side. As always, we appreciate your support and listening to us. And as I said earlier, we'll be back again next week. But until then, you have now heard The Other Side.
Thanks for listening. And remember, you're not fully informed until you've heard The Other Side.